And here is Johnny on the spot.
This Renaissance man has worn many hats: artist, singer, musician, Tai Chi master, producer, corporate president, and that brings us back to artist. May I present Albert Walton. Well, here we are, another exciting interview on with Johnny on the Spot. I'm Johnny, and from Turtleneck Productions, because as we all know, I have a turtleneck. You know, Al Walton, my guest, there's a turtle walking around somewhere with a people neck. Not a good sight, but there you have it. That's as good as the jokes get, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Al Walton is our guest today, and I'm excited to been a friend for many years, at least from my perspective. He might have a different thought on that. And Al, let's start out at the very, very beginning. Where were you born?
El Paso, Texas.
El Paso. Big family, small family?
Let's see, blended family, 5 kids total,
Mm-hmm.
and a mom and a stepdad and a dad. So I had 3 parents throughout my life.
What did your birth father do for a living at that time?
He was the secretary treasurer for the local Pullman's Union. So he was a Pullman porter and worked on the railroads. And we obviously got to spend time on trains back in the day when trains were the way to get back and forth to the east and west.
Especially in the South, El Paso, and did the trains go straight across like the highways do to like Florida, or did they?
No, there were like more regional kinds of, like the Southwest stuff is where the Southwest routes is where he worked mostly. So when my parents divorced and he moved to, I'm sorry, when we moved to California, we still were able to jump on a train. And because the porters were all knew each other,
Mm-hmm.
and knew each other's family, so my mom could feel secure just putting us on the train with a basket of food, and that we'd get to California or back from California to Texas safely. So I just took that for granted, and it was fantastic being a kid to just look out the train window. Adults were being bored to shit, but it was exciting every time we had a chance to go on the train and go out west or come back east.
Of the 5 kids, where do you fit in the mix? In the middle, or?
I'm the oldest.
Oh, you're the oldest. Wow.
Yeah.
And the wisest?
Of course.
Aha.
Of course.
Now you're. I think that's an interesting. That's an interesting life, the train life, which your father was doing. What did your stepdad do?
My stepdad was a maintenance guy, and he was a janitor,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a country guy, and he was how would I say, a gentle giant. He was a big guy, and he had totally strong hands, and he was just very simple and quiet, and you just didn't want to ever ruffle that quiet. But he did teach me how to work. He let me go with him to the job, because being a maintenance man, you go into office buildings at night to clean everything and leave it for the people that are going to come with real jobs the following day. But he was tenacious about, when he taught me to wax floors, the first time I got my hands on a waxer, it almost ran away with me.
Those things are
But he would
monsters.
persist and just say, no, we can't. It's not perfect yet. And he would leave the place looking like it was just built. He just had that kind of fanatic perfection about his work, which meant he was always working because that's the kind of attention that people who hired maintenance guys wanted to have. So
Did that
very
have an
long.
impact, that message of being it's got to be do you think that had an impact on you growing up?
Oh, no doubt, no
Yeah.
doubt. Yeah, I remember the first time I did I'll call it an adult job with him was when we were at we needed to paint a small church down in Watts. And it was, I think his cousin or somebody related was the pastor of the church. And as a favor or tithe, we were going to put a new coat of paint on it. And I was excited to do that until we got on the job site. And then my dad said, "Okay, I'll get this area down here. Now I want you up on the scaffold to get the top part, So
Oh man.
that was the reality set in, oh, wait, this is dangerous. I could actually fall off this thing. So, but, again, it was like, oh, you missed a
Your dad
spot.
is going, your dad's saying, well, I ain't going up there.
No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. You're young,
5 Ks.
even if you fall, you'll be okay in a while. But
Oh man, he'll bounce. But you
so,
have an interesting story about school in Texas and the times of what was going on socially. Uh, could you expound a little bit on that?
yeah, Brown versus Board of Education mandated that um, schools had to admit everyone, uh, regardless of race and location, etc. And there was an elementary or yeah, an elementary school that was a few blocks away from where we lived. Uh, and so when we went to enroll, they booted us out and said, "Nope, you can't go to this school."
Mm.
So my mother was pretty tenacious. She took it all the way to the school board. I remember getting on the bus, probably the same bus that Rosa Parks was on. We went downtown to the school board, and she dressed me real nice in little slacks and tie and everything. But it was fascinating. I had never been around all white people, all dressed in ties and suits, and the whole court thing
Yeah.
was another world. So I was totally fascinated, and I didn't quite understand why she left pissed off every day, but eventually I did understand that. But she got them to, even though I didn't go to the elementary school in the neighborhood, I did go to the middle school, and I was one of the first 5 Black students in that city allowed to commingle with the local kids in a middle school. And that was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of external pressure on my parents. My father's work started to dry up because the authorities released our address in press because it was news, and school integration was a big deal back then. So there were a lot of death threats, and I didn't appreciate my parents' courage until I got older. But they would, I found my mother would often follow behind me a few blocks when I would walk to school, just because she had gotten death threats to me the night before. So she was always having to balance, being mom and being protector.
Yeah.
So that was that really kicked up my respect for my mom. And
Mother Lion, you know.
yeah, and they made that decision consciously and said, no, this is how it is, this is our right, and we're going to do it, and fuck you. I mean, that wasn't the language they used,
Yeah.
but their actions spoke more.
Yeah. Boy, that's your mom. I've seen pictures of your mom. She looked like a strong woman, but yet she had a real there was a softness about her, you know, as well.
Yeah, yeah, she had a tough life,
Yeah.
and ultimately with 5 kids. I mean, I can imagine, but especially in that time and in that day.
Yeah.
And what I look back on is the how would I call it? For example, once there was a television, all the kids wanted, we wanted to do what the kids on television were doing. And that's when the reality of segregation started to sink in, that, they would tell us, well, we'd love to do that, but we can't. We can't take you to Playland Park because we're not allowed to go there.
Yeah.
Oh, at the movies, oh, well, we have to sit in the balcony. We can't sit up close, you know, but we can't see the monster, Well, no, you just have to see him from the balcony.
Oh, there's plenty of monsters, Albert. you,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't want to see. You know, I that my awareness. When we came over from England, lived in Buffalo, New York, and
Oh, yeah.
pretty much integrated black neighborhood. Just to be perfectly honest, and I was a little British whiter than I am now, a little British boy with a little accent, and I never, or at least I certainly can't remember any reverse discrimination. We just got along, and the place, the neighborhood crime shut down when Amos and Andy was on TV, and some of the best TV writing of all time. And then we moved to Arizona and took the southern route, and I was amazed at the wide only drinking fountains and wide only bathrooms. Just it was so incongruous to the life that I had come from. And go to
Yeah,
Arizona where they're all white in Arizona, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's just a
Well,
way.
I mean, flip that. When I came to California, I was still, like 12 or 13 years old,
Mhm.
and we moved here permanently. And it was a real adjustment because I had these built-in constraints that weren't necessary anymore, but my habit and my perception was still viable, So
Yeah,
there would be places where I would hesitate to go into, or I would hesitate at a drinking fountain, or I'd hesitate to go to a restaurant or something and use the bathroom. And it was so programmed and so embedded that it took years for me to even realize or recognize that I was doing that. So that whole system has an enormous impact on people who are in it or victims of it. And you don't see it at the time. It's only when you get extracted from that extreme environment that you see things normalize. And then it opens your eyes and you realize the oppression that was happening before. And yet at the time it was like normal because you
yeah.
didn't have anything to compare it to.
I think a cliche is, "Oh, kids are resilient." You
Yeah,
know, but and obviously there are just you talking about it now. You're going back into that state of mind in your head. No, yeah, I'm resilient. I've moved on with my life. I'm an adult now. I've done a myriad of things, but those memories are still very lucid.
absolutely. And they still shape fundamental instincts that I don't consciously have a handle on. But um, over time, you know, I, to the extent I can divorce myself from that and sort of be in a meditative space
Yeah.
and see it more objectively, that starts to rewire me and reprogram me. And it's, it's many, many decades. But the residue of that social abuse is what I'll call it, is
Yeah.
still there, still
Yeah.
there, shapes everything.
When you talk to your daughter about things of your youth, uh, does it strike a chord with her? Does it fill in some gaps of what you're taught in school?
Well, I mean,
I mean, it's an oddball question, but
well, let me, it brings up an example. I'll tell you how I addressed it as she was growing up, because that's probably better now that she's an adult. We have adult conversations, but
yeah,
as a child, um, what I did, I bought the series Eyes on the Prize, and that's a series of videotapes that PBS released, and it went year by year during the civil rights era.
mm,
And um, I would pick the year of her age when I was her age, and we would watch that episode that year. So we worked our way all the way through
that's cool.
the thing, because you got to see the news clips, you got to see and there was context. So I didn't really have to do a lot of explaining. I mean, occasionally she'd have a question like, did they really do that?
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
that, but that was encouraging, because it meant she didn't feel part of that, connected to it at all. But she knew about it, and over time, doing that, when I realized, I said, wow, we got through the whole series, and it was about a decade, where we stopped doing that. And I missed it, because it would provoke questions from her or whatever, or at least it was a bonding
yeah,
opportunity, or she'd have more sense of, well, when you were my age, this is what was happening around you. And so that gave her some context, and hopefully, that's helped her be a mature, independent person.
yeah. Absolutely, she is. Well, when I was asking the question, I started to think about those those answers. Well, when I was a kid, we used to walk 3 miles in the snow. Dad, you're from El Paso. Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right.
That doesn't work. That doesn't fly, Dad. So we have you in California. You're in school. Were you a good student? Mediocre? Uh, how would you frame yourself?
No, I was always at the top of my classes.
Mm,
I ended up giving the speech at our graduation, and that was controversial, because it was just on the cusp of the civil rights movement, and there were some abuses that weren't being addressed at my high school, even though it was the most integrated high school in the country, possibly in the world at the time, downtown LA, Belmont High. And but they pulled my speech and said, nope, you can't give this.
oh,
So
okay. Wow.
I said, well, you know what? Then I won't give any. No, they wanted to rewrite it.
Hmm.
They wanted certain things taken out and edited. And I said, well, that's okay. I won't give a speech. And then it became controversial. So that
Hmm.
said, okay, go ahead and give the speech. I gave the speech. Everybody goes, great speech. Nothing happened, but it was the fear
It's right.
of hearing the truth out loud, that everybody knew, that's, prompted them to interfere. And it was totally unnecessary. And So, I was, quote, a hero because I stood my ground,
Yeah.
but I was prepared for whatever the consequences were. And I stood by the speech, what was expressed. So that was, I don't know, I forget the question.
I don't even know who I am right now. No, you know, you're so you're a good student. When did you get involved in art? Was that always did that come to you naturally or something?
Yeah, I mean, I started drawing when I was a kid. It was kind of a terrific escape. I mean, the smell of crayons in the morning, it smells like victory.
Victory.
I mean, I just could, I remember in grade school, we would, had a few buddies and we would sit and design cars of the future. And they'd come over to the house and we'd get out a ton of scrap paper and crayons and spend the whole day just
Wow.
drawing cars that as we imagined they would be in the past. You'd be surprised how close we were. And I knew I wanted to do art when my next door neighbor, this wonderful old lady, Mrs. Stewart, Belle Stewart, said, "Oh, I love this landscape painting you did. It was a tiny little watercolor. First time I tried that watercolor." And she bought it from me. And I think she paid me like 8 cents or something, and it was
Boy,
like,
did you
okay,
rip her off?
this is the ticket here, but buddy, I'd have to find 4 pop bottles to cart to the market to make this much money. So it was like, oh yeah, this is kind of good, and everybody encouraged me. So I'd always, it was a personal release, if you will, to do art and draw, and then I, got special notice because I had skill at it, and so I parlayed that through school into a scholarship at Otis, and that was a real fortuitous circumstance where a couple of famous guys uh, mentored me. I mean, very directly, and they would pull me aside and help me with understanding what was happening. But in that time, which this was like the early '60s, probably about 66, 65, 66, somewhere in that. It was still pretty segregated. And I think there were like 2 or 3 Black students in the whole student body. So there was still roadblocks, and you needed some guidance to get through it without pissing people off or not going crazy. So that was fortuitous, and you got classical training. I mean, drawing and painting 8 hours every day.
Yeah.
Eventually, you get pretty good.
Get your 10,000 hours in.
Yeah, easily.
Did you uh did you gravitate to realism or more landscapes or
No, no, it was classic figure drawing nudes, and then still lives.
mm,
There was one project where for the whole semester you painted. We had this broken down motorcycle on the stand in the center of the studio, and we drew and painted that tableau for the
mm,
whole semester. If you got bored crazy, then you moved around the room and found another spot or another point of view. But and you were limited to, what was it, amber,
oh really?
ochre, and cobalt blue, and that was it. And charcoal, black and white, and the cobalt blue, and I think it was ochre.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. And eventually something beautiful comes out of that limited funnel because you'll find it because you have to.
You have to, yeah.
Yeah. And so that discipline really was fantastic in the drawing nudes every day, all day long, and then I remember Joe Magnani, he's an illustrator. He's actually one of my mentors who signed off for me to get a scholarship, would come by my easel and say, okay, Walton, you got some really nice line work here, and the form is starting to emerge, but you got to draw with your balls, man. And then he'd walk away, and he had a big stogie all the time. It was like classic.
Hey, Walton,
Yeah,
draw by your balls, buddy.
oh yeah, he was great.
No, it's a great character. It'd be a fun character in a show. I tried to paint myself nude, but I ran out of paper. So you now this is college, right? I assume, right?
Yeah, this was
About
just
college age, and this is also Vietnam time. Were you
yep.
able to skirt around that? Obviously,
Yeah, I got a what do they call it? A deference or whatever.
deferment. Yeah,
Yeah, deferment medical, and it was completely circumstantial. I had had an asthma attack, and I had to go to the hospital because it was pretty severe.
Mhm.
But there was a hospital record of me being admitted for that extreme asthma attack. And when I went to selective service and went for the physical, and they started asking questions, and I said, this. And I gave them the paperwork from the admission to the hospital. And they said, at the end of the day, after they put us through all that humiliation of, get in a circle and bend over and grab your ankles, and
Yeah.
somebody in the middle of the circle walks around and looks up every guy's ass. Uh,
That's the part I liked. But that's a different story. Never mind.
So you get your clothes back on, you're standing there, and everybody's waiting to see which bus they're going to ship out on.
Yeah.
The guy comes to me and says, I'm sorry, son, you just didn't make the cut.
Oh
Your
no.
hospital records kept you out. And I went, oh man.
Oh, oh man. Oh, no artillery?
Everybody's after that, all my bros and buds are going, how did you do it, man? How did you get out of this? So I
That was
had
the
a lot of
biggest
my
eye
buddies
opener for me
that
was realizing that after the physical, you got on the bus and went, in my case, Fort Ord, and I went, wait, I thought you got to go home and think about it. No, man,
that's
it was
right. That's
like
right.
boom.
And I was at that point, I was expecting to get on the bus. I
Yeah,
I didn't realize the weight of that medical report
me neither.
until I was actually there. So I got bailed out. I didn't have to make that decision to run or to go along. It was made for me. So karma.
Oh yeah, no kidding. It's a yeah. I got out of it. I had to drive a Goodwill truck for 2 years, and some great stories came out. Alternate service, they called it. I had to do that, and but again, got some great stories from the people that I met in the Goodwill deal. In fact, I still shop at Goodwill, folks.
Yeah, all right.
I could
Yeah.
drive a truck today if I really wanted to. May have to. Um, when did you get involved in Tai Chi?
Oh boy.
We're probably skipping ahead a
19,
tad here, but
1971. Walking through the Bronson Canyon Park and saw a couple of guys doing Tai Chi sets. And I was curious and I asked them, what is this? And after they finished, I started bugging them with questions, and they said, well, we come out here on Saturday mornings at 9 o'clock and do this. And if you want to learn, come out. And and I said, how much is it? And they said it's free. So that was the magic word.
Yeah.
So I got up on Saturday morning, and pretty much for the next 45 years, I've been studying and participating and doing that.
And teaching too, right?
Pardon?
And teaching? Teaching.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I started teaching about 10 years after I started studying, and then I founded a Tai Chi group in Laguna, which went on for about 8 years. Um, and then I had private students off and on. And I also studied as a sort of a jump off of Tai Chi. I got to meet Master Howard Lee,
Mhm.
and Howard was master of uh, Chole Fut Kung Fu, which is the most recent comprehensive Chinese martial arts system.
Mhm.
And it is a system, and you learn the principles, and then you can articulate them into a style. But it was a radical approach. It wasn't simply memorization and rote.
Mhm.
And so I studied with him for, I don't know, another 15 years. And he actually picked me to be one of the students to represent him at the Aspen Academy of Martial Arts. And it was a summer retreat in Aspen for people who wanted to study martial arts, but also most of them were security personnel and bodyguards and those.
Wow.
So when I went to the thing, flew in, I got off this tiny little plane, and then they drive me up to the top of this mountain in a big tent. And I look around, and it's all like, special forces guys. I mean, huge badasses. And I'm supposed to teach them how to be a badass.
Better
But,
ass.
but for some reason, they believed that I knew what I was doing. I thank Bruce Lee for that, because he was this tiny guy who could do all
Yeah.
this. But I did. I taught there a couple summers, and that was really good for my own credibility to me about my ability to do that and
Yeah.
manage it. And it really changed my life in the sense that it was like concealed carry. I had all the skill set, and I could be calm in the face of a crisis
Yeah.
because I knew I had something that could mitigate that. So it never escalated because of that knowledge. And that was a revelation. It's like, oh, you don't know what I know, but I know enough that you can sense it and you'll leave me alone. And that really played out.
Well, it's funny. Before we started, I was telling you that I'm dog sitting a dog with my cats, and they kind of exemplified that of just knowing, just kind of sizing each other up, looking, nothing happened, a little hiss here and there, and they just went, you know what? We'll just figure this out. So the dog's sleeping right now. The cats walked by the camera, so they're pretty chill at the moment. The other cat's totally terrorized. So I hide away somewhere. But again, mirroring the human image. Now we met right around this time, and I believe at ABC Dunhill Record Warehouse, right?
Oh, yes.
I mean,
Yes, the good old days, right?
it's so funny. There's so many people that I still know today from that record warehouse. And if there ever was a group of people that didn't belong in a record warehouse, but for whatever reason, we were all brought together, and we got to see some terrific concerts,
Oh,
from
yeah. Yeah,
down at the
absolutely.
Troubadour in different places. So, and you were performing at the time with your buddy Kenny. I
Yeah.
was doing well. Right after that is when we got into children's music and theater quite heavily because that was I quit the job at ABC Dunhill, and then Glenn Ballantyne, who was doing jingles, a piano player, songwriter.
Yeah, I remember Glenn.
Remember him?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Russ Champlin, who I just talked
Oh,
to,
yeah.
and he's working at a pharmaceutical company that was going great guns up in Northern California with the whole COVID deal. Then so they hired everybody out and this and that, and now that COVID has gone its way, they're laying people off left and right, and I'm going. Russ Champlin working at a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, right, right.
That's another interview for another time,
Absolutely.
But
That's
we met, and then you started. There's a lot of stuff that went on during this time. There was you knew Al Jarreau, and we all kind of interacted together, and you worked in our kids show, singing, acting, playing harmonica, guitar, whatever, and uh, we did a bunch of shows. Went up the California coast together, and
Oh, yeah, that's
did
right. I
shows
remember that now.
remember in Monterey, we did shows there, and
Yeah, at Don somebody's place.
Don Livermore in
Yeah, yeah.
yep, outside of in Pacific Grove.
Yeah,
Beautiful,
Pacific Grove.
beautiful
Yes.
area, and you met my parents in San Jose.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That was on that road trip,
that
right?
was on that road trip. Yeah,
Wow.
and you trying to understand my dad's British accent. My parents used to love having my friends over. They were very hospitable, that way, and loved the
Yeah.
companionship and the camaraderie of everybody. So we did shows for quite some time, and I remember a story with you get your payday and you'd head on down to the track, and you became quite an aficionado of the track and the horses and picking winners. That's the key.
That's right.
But you ran into some interesting folks down there that was their livelihood, right? Was
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's when I realized that people actually made a really good living, uh, handicapping and wagering. And of course, there was the other extreme of the people, going through the trash cans to find accidentally tossed tickets. So, I mean, you had the extreme, you had the guys in really beautiful suits in the clubhouse, and you had these guys in the grandstand picking through the tossed away tickets. So it was a microcosm of, the way stuff is in every industry. But
that
there were
social
people,
security check as cash to go down?
yeah. And it was like you got to see the full range of humanity in that place because everybody had the desire to hit a long shot, and everybody had their philosophy about how to wager. And the pros were totally unsentimental about it. I mean, it was strictly a statistics number game, and maybe they were raking 5% of their bankroll on a given day.
Mhm.
So let's say that's a couple $100. But if you do it every day while you're sitting on your butt doing
Yeah,
something you absolutely love, I could get by with a couple $1,000 a week.
I love the process. Get a cup of coffee in the paper, right? And then
Yeah,
and it was the whole. What you have to look at it at the whole aspect. Pull the camera back and see the whole process, the arc of the whole thing. It's quite amazing. And as you discovered, people that could actually make a living doing that, and in some cases, a very good living.
well, I had the opportunity to meet one of the top trainers in Southern California and ask him some questions, because by then I knew just enough that I didn't know shit. So I said, David, so tell me about this, tell me about that. And his answers were just so refreshingly simple. I said, so is there any truth to guys pulling horses up, to
Yeah.
make sure the outcome is, and he goes, that is total crap. he says, he says, if that was the case, nobody would be training. We'd all be rich.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he says that, these guys, the horses get tired. And so if you want a jockey who's riding, you want a jockey that's not going to freak your horse out because he's going to expend more energy and get tired sooner.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
guys like Bill Shoemaker, the horse barely knew somebody was on their back just because the way they handled them. And so that's how he would sort of gauge his riders in terms of just that energy burn factor. And he says some guys are brutal and tough guys, and you throw them on a horse, and the horse is scared just from their vibe, and they're very sensitive animals, and they're spending energy whether they're standing still or not if they're frightened. And so when you want to get a rider, you want to get a rider that the horse feels comfortable from the first minute. He might not be the best horse, but he'll get tired. Uh, he'll be able to run longer
Yeah.
before he's exhausted. And I mean, I'm thinking, wow, does everybody know this?
That is pretty zen, man.
Yeah, yeah. But he was a successful trainer, and
Yeah.
so I would go out and I see, oh, David's got a horse run, I'll bet that because I know the sensibility and the strategy behind it, and depending on the jockey and all that stuff. So it's a terrific hobby. I don't have the dedication to do the work to make it a living, but boy, it's really an enjoyable hobby.
When you got involved in graphics with the burgeoning post production industry, was that an extension of your artwork, or was it a different animal? Were you hired on? Was that your portfolio that you were hired on, or was it a different animal altogether?
No, no, it was in a snapshot. I was a rep for Bruce Wilson, who was a photographer, and we worked our way from print to television. And so through the television connections, I met Wendy Vanguard and some other folks, and they needed a rep. So I said, "Oh, that's great. I like what you do, and I'll rep you too." But then I liked the process, and so I basically partnered with them to build a graphics company. And we had access to ABC and the promos. So there was a base of revenue if we were able to deliver. And we put a team together and delivered, and we were in biz for, I don't know, several years.
Was
Uh,
that California film?
yes, yeah.
That was cutting edge stuff. I mean, inventions were being made at the time that were
Well,
revolutionized.
we did some first ever stuff. It's like we were right on the cusp of computer generated imaging. And so we did some experimental stuff, but the networks were starting to buy into it. And we were a very popular design boutique. And eventually I went off to work with CIS. It was one of our vendors where we used to almost like a laboratory environment where we could take slices and pieces of film and combine them in ways that hadn't been possible before because of digital technology. And eventually they said, hey, we need somebody to be an interface with the clients when they come in. So like an in-house producer, and they offered me the job, and the rest was a career.
Yeah.
So I got to be on the cutting edge of a lot of stuff that was done for the first time ever. And that was just magical. You know, ultimately it ends up being just a shitload of work for not necessarily a proportionate
Yeah.
compensation,
And
but
also
but you know
time and
the
time, you know.
experience and to be able to say, okay, well, this has never been done before,
Yeah.
and we just did it, and I know how it got done, and we were, you know, so that was valuable, and it parlayed because other facilities who hadn't done it, uh, it made me valuable to them, and the
Mhm.
knowledge I had on how to make that stuff work. So that was, you know, the Editel transition, moving from eFilm to Editel, and then sort of following a model that I had proved and participated in for the previous 7 years or so.
And Editel, you were the president of Editel, right?
Yeah, I came as a producer,
Producer.
and over time, uh, you know, worked my way up the ladder to run the place. And as soon as we started making serious money, New York's, the headquarters, started paying attention to us, and our profits started disappearing into a hole back east.
It's that guy appears again with a cigar.
So you got to pay with your mouth.
Here's your balls, Walton. Well, that's I worked for you at Editel for 3 years. Took me 3 years to take that company down, damn it.
Well,
but,
good for you. It took me a little longer, but we're in that same lifeboat now.
but you know, I could, and I worked at 3 or 4 different post production. They all went out of business afterwards, but it was for a variety of reasons. The one
Yeah,
is what you talked about, where you were shipping, you know, cash loads of money back east, and the industry was changing in Hollywood, where we were located, and a lot of it was moving over to the west side for commercials and this and that.
right.
And then on top of that, a lot of the studios were opening their own
Yeah,
boutique, you know, places. So all
yeah,
that happened at the same time. So it was I considered Editel a Ferrari of post production, and then and then all of a sudden you're ready, you go. Wait,
that's
where you
it.
have one guy, you know, is your editor, and then you go, let's run it through audio. You go, same guy is in audio, and so on and so forth. And then eventually, of course, people are editing out of their, you know, their bedrooms and living rooms.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, technology really changed the face of that pretty rapidly. It was a lot slower than I anticipated, but you know, that's the way it is. And
Yeah,
that whole model, you know, one of the things we did was to basically make the facility flexible enough that we would just have gear available and a suite available, and then make one-off deals with artists. So
yeah,
then it became managing the artists, because the artists had their own following in terms of clients. So it was a backdoor way of doing more sales,
yeah.
but cutting overhead, and the artists baked in their compensation from their client. So it really was you know, the only survivable scenario that I was able to come up with, and it worked great for a while. We did, you know, a few, what was it, $1 million a month, I think it was,
Yeah.
of actual collections. You know, if somebody had said, "Oh, you're collecting $1 million a month for this," I would never have imagined the ability to do that. But we did.
And 997,000 of that was shipped back east.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah,
Little
right.
bitches.
To vendors that I'd never heard of. That was the other killer. It was
Yeah,
like, you
right.
know,
Who are these?
Blumbo Plumbing.
Yeah, Bob's Plumbing and Lube, you know,
Yeah,
in Brooklyn.
it was blatant. I mean, had I been a sharper cookie at the time, I would have dipped my finger in it myself.
Yeah. Yeah, probably ended up in a dumpster somewhere.
Yeah, right.
I, I'd be remiss if I don't mention your writing classes. Give me a little bit of feedback on that. And I'm gonna. This is one of those Johnny on the spot moments. I'm going to ask you to read one of your pieces from. If you could put your hand on your poetry book, I'd love you to read a piece. So think about that while you're telling me a little bit about how you got involved in this writing class.
Oh boy. Well, that was
You're on the spot. See?
yeah. I'm trying to think of the year. It would have had to be 84, 85.
That's remarkable. That's
When
really
I think it was 80, yeah, 86 when we first moved over here. And at that time is when I just severed ties with California film. I had a relationship with the animated uh, camera place that we used as a vendor, so I was working with them. And but I wasn't making any money, and I had a kid that was now 1 year old, and I was freaked out. I didn't know what I was going to do, so I just started making a vision board of stuff that I thought I wanted. And then the book, Artist Way, somebody said, "Oh, you should read this and do the exercises." So I bought it, and I started doing it on a daily basis, and it really did augment my vision board. And I picked up a newspaper, and it said, there was an ad that says, "Unleash the writer within." And so since I was writing 3 pages a day aimlessly, I
mm-hmm.
said, well, gee, as long as I'm writing, I might as well try to figure out what I'm doing. So I went to that workshop, and it was a bunch of, people typically related to the industry in some way. And it was run by Kathy Coleman, and she was an award-winning poet and published, and very brilliant lady, good teacher. And she would take all of us hacks and sort of train us on how to write and articulate our expression. And her how would I say, her style was more, how do you get expression, dig down and get some marrow into your work. Kind of like Joe Magnani saying, "Paint with your balls." It was like a real parallel piece of advice. And so eventually, over time, I did write a book. I have a collection of poems, uh, and self-published that one. And I have the second one. The manuscript is finished. I have to figure out the nuts and bolts of how to get this one out. Uh, that industry has changed since I put my first book out. Maybe was it 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So
The self-publishing
that's
industry, you're saying, is changed.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a lot of variations and options in publish on demand. For example, the publishing company, I think it was in Indiana, that did my first book, did a great job, and it was pretty easy to work with them. And suddenly they were off the radar, and I started to dig into it, and it turns out they went bankrupt. And when they went bankrupt, all the original files disappeared. So
Wow.
all of my original files for my first book are gone, irretrievable. And when people say, "Oh, listen, I'd like a copy," uh, there aren't any more available. And even when I go to Amazon, Amazon says, "Oh, we'll get you a copy as soon as they're available." And I know they're not available, but Amazon acts as though,
Yeah.
we're just waiting. And so that whole industry has changed. So I have to find another vendor to actually publish the thing for me.
Man, that's good. You know, that means I have a collector's item. I could sell that on eBay. Make some money on that
Yeah.
that first run.
Well, hey,
Hey,
well, there's
nice.
only like I think I only have like 10 left of the original batch.
Yeah.
So they're not real special to me now.
Yeah, no kidding. Can you lay your hand on something you'd like to read?
Yeah, I think I've got some on the shelf over here. Let me pull one up.
By the way, that picture by Al behind Al, that's Billie Holiday, as he was saying. Beautiful portrait of her next to what was that? You say from 51, Al? 1951 or
I think it was 53, but
yeah,
it's in that ballpark.
yeah, gorgeous. And what is the title? What are you reading from, your first or second?
Well, I'm just trying to grab something that has a little bit of traction beyond just reading it, because when I walked over to the shelf, a piece came to mind, and I just need to find that piece.
Are
And
you the guy that wrote "There Once Was a Guy from Nantucket"? I'm just curious.
yeah, no, that one was much too popular.
That's the one that puts you on the map.
Man down. The man was on the ground, flat out on the hot sidewalk. He had on a nice silk suit, but he had soiled himself. We hovered around him like flies. This was going to be easy. You could see the wallet where his jacket scrunched up. Kermit pinched his nostrils and fanned the air while giggling about the stink. I don't need no money that bad, he said as he backed away. James and Ellis laughed and looked over at me. I took the wallet. Nobody was coming, so I stood there and counted the bills. It was $2 apiece if we gave Kermit a cut. The man moaned, a slow, deep plea of a sound, like a falling airplane. It was Grandpa's voice, his last exhale when they brought him back to the house. His cry coated everything. Time got smoky and thick. I could still see the yard through the curtains. The swing moved by itself. Floorboards on the front porch creaked with no one there. The kerosene lamplight smothered me. I stood in the glare of day with the man's wallet in my hand. I put it back in his pocket and we ran off. I kept the money.
Wow. Is that come from a real situation?
No, it's made up. I mean, it's fragments of
Yeah, yeah,
stuff that
it's heavy.
but that the genesis of that piece was Vanessa said, "Oh, Dad, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to writing class." And she goes, "What do you guys write?" And I said, "We just make up stuff." And she said, "No, really?" And I said, "No, we just make up stuff." And I said, "Okay, just make up something and I'll write about that tonight."
Hmm.
And then she said, "The man is on the ground." And I said, "Okay, I'll start with that and I'll see what happens." So I went off to class and I started with that line, and then I started to build it. Um, Ironically, it turns out it was the first piece that I'd written that got published. So
Really?
it was just like, oh my God. And when I came, I said, "Well, this is the piece. Do you remember that line?" And she goes, "Yeah." And says, "Well, it's the first piece I ever got published, and that was great. It was a bond.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No kid, that's a beautiful piece. I think I'm going to read that at the library for the 5-year-olds on Saturday. I'm kidding, but
Yeah, yeah,
the impact of the piece. I love your. I love the sensory awareness about it. It's a full sensory uh, experience. Beautiful.
yeah. I mean, I was trying to immerse you in it because in situations where you're stretching it to its limit, you know, you're potentially hurting somebody, you're potentially committing a crime or whatever. Not that I would know, but
I'm
time,
asking for a friend. Right? Yeah.
yeah, right. Time gets real malleable around that time and sense, because when you're in that heightened mode, you know, you hear everything, you smell everything, you can touch
Yeah.
fabric, you know, I mean, all of that senses that makes you alive in a way that you typically aren't. And so the distinction is your awareness of all of that, you know, sense stuff. And I just tried to capture it and wrap it around a moment of indecision. Do we take this guy's money? And, you know, and then prompt, what happened? Somebody hit him in the head
Yeah.
and didn't take the money. And, you know, and the
Yeah.
idea that there's a wallet, but do we reach and get it? Is somebody come, you know, that
That
whole,
it's that moment, as the camera moves by, it's one moment in a series of events. It's going
yeah, yeah.
in the yeah, that's great. In your life, can you think of three pivotal moments, and there are many, I'm just calling it down to three, that really had an impact, whether it be closing doors about which or opening doors of choices that were either made for you or you made that you can recall?
Well, I mean, for me, at this point in my life, it's been kind of medical incidents,
Mm,
you know, where, you know, my heart stopped. Uh, I mean, I thought I was perfectly healthy, moving around, doing things, and suddenly I got very, very tired for no explainable reason.
yeah,
To the degree that, you know, when they finally installed a pacemaker, they said, well, you know, you had about 20 minutes of heartbeat left. And that changed my life, like
yeah.
literally and figuratively as well. So that was like the
Definite milestone. Absolutely.
it was the big one. And then the my urologist said, oh, you know, they'd been watching my prostate stuff for years, and nobody could figure out what was wrong, and they couldn't find anything. And so it was just a routine every 6 months to go get a PSA and all that.
Mm,
And this time I went in and he goes, oh, yeah, how you doing? I'll sit down. Nice guy. He always made jokes. And he said, this is bad. And I go, so, okay, waiting for the punchline. Right. And he
yeah,
says, this is bad. He says, we haven't been able to find this all the previous times until now, but you have, you know, stage 10 Gleason level prostate cancer, and it's going to have to come out immediately. And he walks me down the hall to make an appointment with the surgeon right there on the spot. So I know he wasn't screwing around. You know, there was no
yeah,
punchline. So, you know, it took me back to that moment where the guy said, you had about another 20 minutes
yeah,
if they hadn't gotten you here. And then this guy is going, holy shit, we've missed this for years. And now we found it and it's almost out of control. but if we act now, we can say so. So I would say those moments, and then, obviously having my daughter and literally watching her being born. I mean, you don't beat that. That's like the other end of the spectrum. So,
Yeah.
uh, for three things, I think those three are the ones that sort of shifted direction of everything.
No, that's a good way of putting it. It shifts the directions. You're heading one way, and all of a sudden, boom, you
Yeah,
know, all hands on deck, all hands on deck.
yeah,
In all three cases, really.
yeah. I mean, quite literally, it's made me more appreciative of everything because I realize it's impermanence, that nothing can be taken for granted anymore.
Yeah.
And so,
It's life's a trip.
just don't fall.
Paint with your balls, it's uh the whole story. Be careful what you ask for, or what you ask for, like looking with other people. Gee, I wish I was like fill in the gap, because until you see the full arc of the context of everything, be careful what you ask for. We've got
Yeah,
we've
yeah,
got this life, we're living it. I get to talk with you. We've got to work together on stage. We've sung together and worked together in a business-like environment, and it's been a trip. So
yeah. I mean,
thank you
seriously, all the
for
way that arc
being
from the
here.
record store or record warehouse
Yeah,
to now. I mean, that's quite an arc.
it really is. It's every one of us has a story, and,
Yeah,
and a lot of times we're too busy talking to listen. But when you actually stop and listen, we're quite interesting folk.
yeah,
You know.
agree.
Well, thanks for being with us today. And I think we only scratched the surface. So we'll come around and visit again, unless the doctor calls and says we got to
Yeah,
record
right.
again.
Oh my God, there goes the beeper now.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much
I,
for being on this
and
show.
I can watch this on.
Oh yeah. It's Ukrainian television. It's kind of
Oh,
underground.
oh yeah, there you go.
Well, I'll send you a copy of this for your edification, and
Awesome.
it'll be fun to play it back, and I'll insert some pictures that I've seen that you have posted. We'll insert pictures throughout, and if you think of anything that you'd like to add in there, I know that you read a lot, and so
Hello.
there's phrases and things that you might have run across. Like I'm still thinking about your mom walking 3 steps behind you, going, "Well, if he gets it, I'm good."
Yeah, yeah. She was smarter than I give her credit for.
Yeah, you go, "Oh, now I get it." All right, buddy. Well, thanks so much. All the best to you and yours, and we'll catch you down the road a bit.
Okay, man. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.
And that was Johnny on the Spot. Don't forget to like and subscribe.